And now a message from our friends at Fetching Food.
The 1970s and 80s had Elbow, Gravy Train, Purina, Meow Mix, and Bell Bottoms. You've changed your clothes, now change how you feed your pet. Like Bell Bottoms, kick the kibble and join us in the 21st century with the healthiest diet for dogs and cats. Feed naturally, feed raw, feed Fetching Foods.
Groomer Next Door podcast.
Excuse me. Could you tell me how to get to the medical school? I'm supposed to be doing a lecture in about 20 minutes and my driver's a bit lost.
You go straight ahead and you make a left over the bridge.
That's a lovely accent you have. New Jersey?
Austria.
Austria? Well then, good day, mate. Let's put another shrimp on the barbie.
Let's not.
Hello, pups and kittens, and welcome to a Salmonella, E. coli, and Listeria free episode of the Groomer Next Door podcast. I'm your host, Chris Green, and joining us this week is Dr. Cathy Alinovi. She is an amazing doctor, and I probably would not have been able to be in contact with her if it wasn't for my good friend, Dr. Lori Koger, and Susan Thixton. Of course, as always, I listen to these ladies because they know so much and so much more than I do. So I'm very grateful and happy whenever they say, hey, there's somebody to talk to. I'm always here to listen. We are going to talk about her story, and we are going to dive into this whole raw milk situation. And I'm going to make this clear. It's raw milk for animal consumption. Now, the FDA has made multiple different claims, whether it's Answers Pet Food, or it's Hair Today, or it's this whole thing in New Jersey with raw milk. It has been a constant, cloud of BS. And we will go into all of that. But before we do, let's go into our Fact of the Week. Alright, so let's break this down. The FDA has been parading their favorite child, Salmonella, out in every one of the recalls lately. And then there will be their other two children that are less important to them, but they still like to parade them around, and that is E. coli and Listeria. Now, the thing that I'm finding to be completely a misrepresentation is that, one, every one of these alleged recalls are not recalls. They are warning letters, and they're not accurate. You don't have the proper testing. Everything is completely incorrect, and yet they're still putting their opinions out there. Now, here's what I gather. They like to say the word salmonella, and that's their favorite, and then it goes with Listeria afterwards. Now, the thing that they're trying to tell everybody is that we all have, and our furry friends and us all have immunodeficiency disorders, which is not true. We don't all have it. But an immunodeficiency disorder is an immune deficiency disease, which occurs when the immune system is not working properly. The thing is that the scare tactic is, oh no, you're all going to get salmonella. You're all going to get E. coli poisoning. Which, again, I can go to my local market, pick up produce, pick up meat, pick up something, bring it home, and guess what? It's going to possibly contain some levels of E. coli, some levels of salmonella. The difference for human to dog cat is we wash and cook our stuff. With dogs and cats, they do too, but in a different way. It's in their digestive. They're able to do this. And that's the breakdown. That's what I always found really interesting when it comes down to a dog and cat, is how they break all this stuff down. So we've been trained as humans that we have to cook everything, cook all of it out, and it'll be safe. Wash it, wash it, wash it. It'll all be good. All right, but I'm sure we're obtaining a little bit of these, and there are such a thing as good bacteria. So that's the part that's driving me nuts. And I understand that there's over 100 primary immunodeficiency disorders. So of course, I get that. But to say we're all in that lump sum is what's driving me nuts. And which leads me over to raw milk, which is what this whole thing is all about. Now, I'm going to say this, I'm not saying raw milk for humans. I'm talking about raw milk for animal consumption only. And that's the issue that's been going on in New Jersey. Now, I'm going to put the benefits of what raw goat milk is, and then I'm going to do raw cow milk. And it's really interesting. Now, again, I'm not saying as a human, go out there and drink this, but we're talking about animal consumption here. Now, health benefits for that, it reduces inflammation. Inflammation is the root of most body pains and diseases. It supports a healthy digestive and immune system. It prevents cancer. Its bioavailability and higher nutrient absorption. Alkaline forming. That's just raw goat milk. Raw cow milk is super rich in healthy bacteria and makes for a great probiotic drink that can benefit your digestive system. It has various enzymes that may help improve the digestion of nutrients from the foods. Now, I've had experience firsthand with rescues that unfortunately the pup or the kitten were separated from mom way too early. I have fed them raw goat's milk, and unbelievable how they thrive on this. I've never lost a kitten or a puppy by feeding raw goat's milk. Example, my own puppy, which you've all have seen different things on Ojo. Ojo and her brothers, all had a raw goat milk because Katana wasn't able to produce enough milk. So what did we do? We supplemented with raw goat's milk to help them in their early stages. They thrived. They didn't have any kind of E. coli, salmonella, or listeria issues. We didn't have runny poop. We didn't have any sickness. So that's the part that we all need to see. I have done it personally. I know a lot of people in the rescue field who has done it personally. We've all been down this road where we're completely at a loss. We either can get another mom who is still nursing to hopefully take in the puppy or kitten, which doesn't always happen. We can buy a powder supplement, which doesn't always fill the need, or you find something that is as close to it and as beneficial. And by that sound, Dr. Cathy's about to come into the podcast studio, so I'm going to shut up now and welcome Dr. Cathy to the podcast.
Oh, hello. Hold on a sec. Dad, we have a guest on the podcast.
All right, this week on the podcast, I'm really happy, and I've already mentioned it today, but I'm really excited. I get to sit down and talk to Dr., and I'm going to keep that in place, Dr. Cathy Alinovi. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Hey, Chris, I'm excited.
I am too. I mean, I looked up a bunch of things that you've done, and you're absolutely amazing and funny, and this is going to be a lot of fun. I know it will.
Thank you. We'll try. I don't know. That's a high standard. I'm in trouble now.
Well, you know what? I like starting off with this one question, and it's a weird question, and I know people probably wonder why I do it, but I'm curious. So, what was the last movie you've seen as of recently?
Oh, I did a whole bunch of TV watching this weekend. I was putting the dreaded tax information into QuickBooks.
Ew.
So I watched Coco, and Netflix had some fun movies on. I saw I.O. and my brain shut off on what there was another sci-fi type movie. So Coco was awesome, and I enjoy the sci-fi stuff as well.
I will say I love Coco, but then again, I've made this joke so many times, and it's not a joke, it's a joke on me, and that is, even when my daughter is over at a friend's house or somewhere else and I'm home with my wife, we're still watching animated movies. Why, I don't know. It's like,
my daughter's 15. She was in her room. She came out and she's like, "Oh, what's this?" And I told her, and I said, "It's really cute." She's like, "Oh, okay, that's cool, peace." She went back to her room, and I'm like, "Okay, I'm watching Coco alone with my taxes."
you know what? I can't say that it was a bad choice.
It was a good choice. I've been wanting to see it. It was a great movie.
It is a good movie.
And then I love the animals, the animal spirits, and how the dog became one, and it's just absolutely adorable and pretty colors, and who can't love that sort of whole concept?
I loved it. I thought it was a wonderful movie, and it just had so much to it, and it was bizarre. It wasn't really that Disney type movie either. That's what I was like, ooh, this is fun.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
It was. Yeah.
Well, let's get to know you. So let's start with your origin story, and let's go pre-2016. So we're just going to talk about what started, making you into the Dr. Cathy that you are, and then we'll get into the other stuff later.
Okay. I've always wanted to be a veterinarian, since I was at least 9. My best friend growing up was a Great Dane named Thor. I didn't have brothers and sisters, so I'd come home from school, and there was Thor, and he was my bud, and so I was going to be a veterinarian.
Nice.
And so I did, eventually. The other thing I had, so in high school, it's like, I really want to be a veterinarian, and I also really want to serve my country in the military. So I graduated Duke University in 1986 and then went in the Air Force for 8 years. And then I went to vet school, and it was awesome because I got to do my 2 life dreams.
Wow.
Pretty cool.
That is not many people can cross off even one of their dreams, but you got to do 2 of them. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, man.
Interesting places that you were stationed during your time?
Well, I could make a joke, and I hope not to offend anybody. I was overseas the whole time. I started out in Utah. No.
Nice.
I did start out Utah, Hill Air Force Base, and then I was stationed at Incirlik Air Base in Turkey. And then my last assignment, Army assignment in Kaiserslautern. I supported the 3-star general who was in charge of the entire deployment to help with the whole Yugoslavia thing. So deployed to Hungary for a couple of months with all of that. And then I was like, okay, time to go. Let's go to vet school now.
I would think that Turkey would be a lot of fun. I would think that would have been a great deal of fun.
Wonderful. It was a great country. The people there are so kind. I made a point, because you have the choice when you're in the military. You can live on base, or you can live off base. And I thought, well, what's my point of going overseas if I'm going to be on base? And so I lived off base, out the gate, at a really, it was, by American standards, maybe it's not luxury, but it was clean, and the people were wonderful. The landlord's family took care of me. They made sure everything was safe. The food was phenomenal. I brought back so many, rugs. I collected rugs, floor rugs, from anything from the little floor rug that goes to the side of the bed, and giant 7 by 10 foot rugs in the living room, and some were hand imported across the border from what might have been called Persia, and a lot were locally made in Turkey. And I have just wonderful friends and great memories, and absolutely worth repeating. It was great.
That sounds absolutely awesome. I mean, if you would just stop right there, it would have been enough. But then, you know, you're like, okay, I've achieved my goal, and now it's time to go and become the veterinarian that I planned to be since I was 9. So you start applying to schools, and you get in, and you start all of your education, and then what?
So I went to Purdue. Where is that? Hey, that's West Lafayette, Indiana. And then, you know, it's interesting. I think I have this thing. Well, I know for a fact. I've always been, I look at things a little bit differently than everybody else. I was the only person in my class who tracked food animal. When these days in vet school, the first 2 years, everybody has exactly the same training. And then the next 2 years, you can specialize a little bit. And the last years where there's a lot of specialization. And I think cows are just cool. Have you ever met a cow in real life?
Yes. Yes.
I mean, they can lick their nose with their tongue.
That is true.
Right. They're just neat animals. To me, they're just massive, giant dogs. They do everything. Okay, so they eat grass exclusively, or vegetation exclusively, unless humans come along. And so I really felt this great camaraderie, and so I just totally enjoyed them. So I tracked food animal, and then I graduated vet school, stayed in the Indiana area because I had met my husband while I was there, and then and that was 2001, and then by 2008, and the economy crashed. There wasn't a whole lot of food animal business anymore, but it was so much fun as I developed my practice, because I met the farmers, and then I helped them take care of their dogs, and then I really got involved with the dogs and the cats, and then working with horses and cattle. And I remember a client had a horse that was lame, and I knew it was in what we would call the knee, that in a horse is the stifle, but, you know, back leg, knee, joint. And I was like, okay, horse is limping there. And they're like, yeah, well, we've had people and they've injected the joints and done all the standard things. And I was like, you know, I don't know anything about chiropractic, but I think that would fix this. And about the same time, I had a little dog in, similar issue, shoulder. And all I had been trained on was, well, give some pain medication, except the dog wasn't really in pain. It was just limping. So I learned chiropractic for animals, and then got completely excited about all that other stuff to look at. And somewhere through there, I realized the importance of food and nutrition. Can you believe that? So I went from this conventional, you know, herd health, veterinary medicine to completely coming at things completely just the other side of the coin, and putting it all together and integrating. And that's what I ended up being, was an integrative veterinarian, and just putting everything together for my clients and giving them full options. What do you want? What works in your life? Yeah.
Interesting. So that's probably around then is when you really started to see the holistic side. That was the aha to that. Now, that's when it gets to be interesting, because here you're really into the more of the farm type animals, the big animals, and now you're seeing things in a holistic way, and it's, oh wait, dogs need raw, they need to go back to biologically appropriate, and you're kind of, in a sense, you're seeing your first passion in the whole animal spectrum of the cow, and you're going, oh, but now the dog has to eat the cow. That's got to be a little odd.
Well, and then realize how important then what we're feeding the cattle, right? And those cows and the sheep, not only do our dogs and cats eat them, but we eat them also. And these are, so something that was really hard for me because of, you know, the emotional attachment that you make with the animals. I had clients that would like get a little dairy calf, and the spares were always the males because, you know, they don't make any milk. So they would raise these little bull calves in order to feed them out so that then they could later butcher them and have freezer beef. And I had clients, and I can see this perspective, who had such a hard time because even if you call this calf, you know, ribeye, you still form a bond with this animal because they are these living, thinking creatures with emotions. And yes, it was quite an eye-opening experience to see every aspect. And then what do we feed them? And how do they feel? And as humans, so, you know, because obviously I'm talking, so dairy, if you think of the Holsteins. So as humans, all the things that we go through with pregnancy and, you know, then nursing the baby, well, the cows go through this also. And it's fascinating that if you really know these animals and their personalities, you can see it. They have the same emotional
attachments,
everything that we go through.
Yeah, they do. And that's why I could never have any kind of cattle or sheep, or I mean I could, but I would never be able to slaughter them. It would be too much for me to handle.
You can't eat them. I know.
I will look at them and go, "You're just like my dogs, my cats." I could never do that. I had a girlfriend who had a cow, and she told me, and this is the very first experience I ever had, and she's like, "Yeah, we would, you know, raise the cow and then we would have it slaughtered." I'm like, "Oh, poor little Moo. It was walking through the house, being, you know, like treating it like in a metaphor of a dog." Obviously it wasn't, but I'm like, "I can't believe you would let your little pet go off to be in your place." I mean, I was notorious for it. I'm surprised she even dated me for that. And I kept that up just relentless, probably for way too long. Because I never know. Yeah, I've never known when to stop. So I probably drudged that on way too long. But I could never do it. Out of a serious note, I'm like, I could never do this. Every fight I would have a tear come out of my eye going, I remember playing fetch with that cow. It wouldn't ever go and get the ball, but I would still throw it. I could just the weirdness that my brain would function. So, wow. So now you've kind of reinvented yourself, where you're like, all right, I now understand the holistic side of all of this. And there's so many treatments. There's acupuncture. There's all these therapies that you can do. There's so many different things that I probably would guess weren't, even in the early 2000s, not really something that was mainstream. So you're really diving into this stuff. You're learning more, and I'm gonna take a wild guess, but every time you learn one thing, you probably want to learn 10 more because you're addicted to the information.
Absolutely. Love learning. It's interesting what you said because I was thinking about that. So senior year of vet school, we all had to do some, you know, research and present it. It was on the large animal surgery block. And I actually researched back then acupuncture and how it can help for anesthesia, for doing surgeries and that sort of thing. And I was fascinated because the head equine surgeon, actually about it. like, yes, he has seen it work, and yes, it takes a little bit longer, but he's seen it work, and the applications that he has seen it used, which is fascinating. And so, because, fast forward 5 and 10 years later, after I learned acupuncture and chiropractic and Chinese herbs and all those things, and so used to thinking how there's veterinarians who do conventional medicine and there's veterinarians who integrate it all and or go strictly holistically. But it's fascinating that this world famous surgeon had experience and had positive things to say about acupuncture, but it was in a really small niche of using it as anesthesia, which ironically, when I learned acupuncture, really very little discussion was talked about using it as anesthesia. It's more used as a functional medicine type thing. So it's cool how everything links around like that, though.
It is. And the thing about a lot of people probably, even in 2019, probably still think, why do we do acupuncture on a dog or cat or farm animal? And it's, again, why do we do acupuncture on a human? It's to relieve any kind of chronic problems. Right. And would you, it's down to even kibble. You know what's in effect here. You know what's causing problems, and it's almost that Bird Box kind of moment. I'm going to put the blindfold on and I'm going to ignore it. And I know
that's an option.
It's an option. Don't look, or the demon will get you.
Yes.
I know at this point now, if people are listening to this in the future, which of course I always think it's so weird that something sits in perpetuity, but if they're listening, going, Bird Box, what are you talking about? Just Google it or whatever.
I did that last weekend, working on my taxes.
That's a whole other story in itself. I'm hoping for a sequel, but again, but anyway. I will digress. If you haven't noticed, that is my specialty. So I will try not to shiny red ball too much. But yes, okay. that could get me into a whole other story. So the reality is now you're fully functioning. Now you have your practice. You have actually gone as far as being considered to be a full-on holistic veterinarian, which in these times, it's almost a bad thing to be referenced as a holistic vet. Would that be safe to say?
Well, you can get yourself into trouble with it. And I say trouble because I was kind of outspoken. I'm still outspoken.
Welcome to my world.
And the more an outspoken somebody is, and the more one is speaks contrary to the system, the more one gets noticed. So through all of my, so I learned chiropractic, started learning about food. I actually learned about pet food because I had a couple of things. And one was I had adopted a dog when I was a senior in vet school, and she itched. She was just itchy. And at school, we determined that she had food allergies. So I did what any good veterinary student does, and I put her on a prescription food allergy formula. And she continued to scratch and have issues, and I was sure I was doing the right thing. So I went to this seminar about allergies, and it turned out it was all about food and the ingredients. And oh my goodness, the guilt trip that I had. Not only was I feeding this food to my dog, but I was also recommending it and selling it to my clients, and I had this major guilt trip. And so I drove home. The class was up in Wisconsin. I lived in Indiana, and I drove home, and by the time I got home to Indiana, I went to the local pet food store that had commercial raw diet, bought some food, brought it home, and 3 days later, my dog stopped itching, stopped shedding, and gosh, I always thought she was aloof. It turned out she was really friendly. So this is 2010, and so this is Kathy's major slap in the face eureka that, wow, this food thing, this is really important. And after that, I had a client who she loved animals. She had about 30 or so beagles. People would tie them to her front porch.
Oh, my God.
And then because out in the country, oh, hey, she has beagles here. Here's another one, or she'd find them and that sort of thing. She had a lot of beagles, and then through similar methods had a lot of cats. And she was feeding everybody what we thought was a reasonable kibble. And she had a whole bunch of cats get sick, and she wasn't sure. It wasn't the food. Stop the food. Everybody got better. She's like, okay, well, I'm going to feed that food again. And a couple of them died, and several of them were hospitalized, and they were really sick. And so I ended up reporting the food to the FDA.
Whoops.
But through doing that, I met Susan Sixton, and then went down through this crazy food is everything path that I realized 80% of what people walked into my clinic with, I could fix through food. I started getting really outspoken about that. People notice when you do that.
They do. Yeah.
They do. Yeah.
I would know what. They do. Yeah, but carry on. I can relate.
Yeah.
So now you're at this stage where you have and of course you have DVM at the end of your name, so that carries a great deal of merit, so to speak. So
At least means that I'm a nerd and sat in the classroom for a lot of hours.
And see, I'm a nerd who sits on a podcast for lots of hours, and so it doesn't have the same effect. but now,
we need some kind of a degree for you.
Oh gosh, you know what? I'm afraid if there is a degree for this, it would be Let's not tarnish whatever university would give that out.
There you go.
So now we're starting to see a little bit of issues, and you're starting to develop. I guess the proper word in this would be enemies. So and of course, the best person out there to have on your side is Susan Sixton, which, I mean, how do I put this to make sense? Susan isn't Susan. She's not Mrs. Sixton, Miss Sixton, Your Royal Highness Sixton. She has to be Susan Sixton. I mean, there is no way. It's like Cher is a one word. You have to go with both her first and last name. And I've never understood it. She even asked me, how do I address her when I'm just talking about her freely? And I said, Susan Sixton. It's like the superhero name, you know. You don't say Captain, you don't say America or Captain. It's Captain America. Come on.
Thank goodness it's just Thor and not Thor Ragnarok. I couldn't say that fast 3 times.
Oh boy, true, yeah. And well, it's like Billy Hookman isn't Billy. You know, it's just, you can't do that. But it's not the same. It doesn't hold the same merit either. So you have her now going, hey, you're on the right path, and I'm sure she's advising you because she's really, really knowledgeable. And when she talks, we all listen. And then what happens to create such a riff that was kind of I don't want to use downfall, but the issues. There's no word to say this blindsided bullying that you faced.
Well, yeah, bully's a good word, and let's say that I've been able to recreate out of it. If you'd spoken to me a couple of years ago, maybe it'd be harder to talk. So I had some disgruntled employees who banded together and figured out that the way to get me in a whole lot of trouble was to make an administrative complaint with the state attorney general's office in Indiana. And so, oh my goodness, I was facing 16 pages of charges. I had animal abuse, fraud, negligence, and then they just had some miscellaneous charges that didn't even have statutes that I was being accused of. And by these disgruntled employees were actually really well informed, because this was actually genius on their part, because in order to fight it, I would have needed $500,000. I didn't have that. And so the other option was for me to sign 16 pages admitting to falsehood. So this is the irony. So you sign a whole bunch of charges that aren't true in order to be able to go back into practice. So I had that as an option. I could have signed all of these charges and said, yeah, I'm an animal abuser, I committed fraud and negligence, and then I would have had a suspension, and after about 8 months, I would have been able to start practicing veterinary medicine again, which to me, I mean, my God, that was my life. That's what I'd wanted to be since I was 9 years old. I almost signed that.
I believe it.
I got until 5 days before, and the stipulation, it finally got to be too much. So are you familiar with what's called the MMPI? It's the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Index. Have you ever heard of this?
I haven't.
Okay. This is, so you know how lie detector tests are not admissible in court?
Yes.
The MMPI is admissible in court. This test was actually designed to be used on witnesses to see if these are credible witnesses in a case, so on either side. And so that was one of the things that had been proposed while I'm going through this just freight train fast ordeal with the general's office. And I said to my attorney, I was like, well, I'll take it. You know, and so she got me, you know, I needed a forensic psychologist that nobody had ever met. And so I took the test and I came out normal. Like, you know, no signs of abuse or psychosis or neurosis or anything. And the Attorney General's office said that somehow I defeated this court admissible test and they weren't going to accept the results. So, yeah, this is where it just started getting crazy. And I'm like, but, so we get to 5 days before I'm supposed to sign this massive document of all of these crazy allegations. And what they wanted me to do was I sign the document, publicly admit, and then take these 16 pages to a forensic psychologist and say, this is me, this is true, perpetuate it for the next 6 to 9 months, undergoing counseling with the forensic psychologist. But wait, I'd already taken the test that proved that it wasn't true. And so, and then my counseling sessions were going to be public record.
Oh, my God.
So finally, and I'm like, this makes no sense. And finally I was like, I can't do it. I am not signing to these things that didn't happen. And so I relinquished my license. And then Indiana, because they just couldn't possibly risk my existence as a veterinarian, I signed it for 99 years.
I saw that.
Setting a precedent. Yeah. So 2 years later, I can laugh.
And it's 2 years almost to the date, too. It's literally almost to the date.
Yes, it was like February 10th or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So, right afterwards, I wouldn't have been laughing. I may have been staring at the wall going, what do I do now?
Right.
Yeah. So, but the irony is that this opened up for me a great possibility, and it was actually thanks to Susan that I got started down this path sooner. She's like, Kathy, you're the perfect person to represent these manufacturers of all these pet food companies that aren't currently represented. Because representation at ASCO, which you and I have already talked about a little bit.
Before we recorded.
Yeah, good thing. But so anybody who looks at a bag of pet food he looks at it and says, oh, it meets ASCO standards. Okay, so it must be balanced, and we can talk about that if we've got 3 hours to talk. But so there are a lot of trade associations that are here representing different groups at these ASCO meetings. There's the group that represents the feed industry. There's the group that represents the 98% of pet food that's in the big box stores. There's the mineral mining group. There's the enzyme technology association, all kinds of great groups. But the companies that make, like, I call them nutritionally defensible pet foods, these companies aren't represented at ASCO. So Susan's like, Kathy, somebody needs to do this. You're the right person. And so it gave me focus.
That's
slowly,
good.
And so here I am. And you want to know what's cool, Chris, is that they can't take anything away from me.
No.
You can't take my license. I've already proven you can't bully me into signing something that isn't true. So, if I don't have any money, that's the only thing that you can take.
That's the only thing, right? But see,
right.
I found it to be very interesting in itself because these claims were obviously not supported with any evidence whatsoever. It's hearsay. And that's what really drove me nuts. And again, by looking into all this, I was like, wait a second. There is absolutely no findings, no evidence, nothing to substantiate this. And yet, these people were able to, in a sense, take down a giant because you are a doctor. So you have so much more than the average person, which it's shocking. So, and to keep going through it, I'm like, and yet the state didn't defend you. They took the word for it. And here you bring in some scientific information and a proof that you can't falsely be able to dance around it. And yet they still say, oh, there's some way because you're, in a sense, and the only way of putting it, you're a genius. So you're able to some way, somehow manipulate your mind into believing the lie. And it's like, what? This is so bizarre. And what's great is that Susan saw right through it. And you were able to just say, all right, well, I can reinvent the wheel again, which, let's see, now we're on our third different task because you've already gone through the Air Force.
I didn't plan on this one when I was 9, but, that's what's awesome about veterinary medicine, and I said this all the way through vet school. What's great is that it can be applied to so many different areas. And so, well, I am applying it differently, and it's pretty cool, actually.
And that's the whole thing is that you still have a brand, and where a lot of veterinarians or even regular doctors, they can't brand themselves at any level. It's okay. Well, here's what I do, and I go through the motions every day. It's the same thing today. I'm going to treat regular, illnesses of a dog and cat, do some spay and neuters, and call it a day. You're like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to go out on YouTube. I'm going to go out and I'm going to do all these things. And in the process, the one thing that we didn't cover, and I'm going to throw in there too, is you're like, I'm going to toss more into, it's almost like making spaghetti, throwing it on the wall, see if it sticks, which I've never tried that, but in a metaphor, this is what you kind of did, where you decided, I'm going to write books. I'm going to become an author. And
I did that in there too. With Susan.
And see, well, who better? I mean,
right?
you get Dr. Koger and Susan Thixton in, and it's just, that's it. That's the end of the day. It's everything you need to know. So you decided to start with, I think I have it in order, Dinner Possible, a cookbook of nutritious homemade meals for cats and dogs. That was your first book that you wrote, correct?
Yes. Yep. Co-wrote that with Susan Thixton. Yep. Yeah. We were so passionate about the food. She's like, Kathy, let's write a cookbook. And I'm like, yeah.
And this is 2010 that this came out, if I'm not mistaken. I don't, unlike some people, I don't have a computer screen in front of me. I kind of take down what I need in things.
You have a good memory.
I try. I do try. Then you decided, okay, I'm not going to just be a one-trick pony and do one, which this is kind of where I love this element. When somebody writes books, because I can read them, but I don't think I can write them. So you decide to go on with Healthy Possibilities for your new puppy. Okay, that's brilliant. So, I mean, people are always either going through a breeder, going to an adoption event, find, another person that their friend, and maybe they had an accidental puppy or kitten kind of situation happen, like we did. And so you're like, you know what? We're going to do a book on this. Brilliant, I got to say. So you were able to actually go into two different areas. I got to commend you on that. But then you're like, well, wait a second. We talked about puppies. What about kitties? So you did one on kittens. Brilliant right there. Now, I'm going to bookmark right there and say, all right, so you've come to these two places now. Did Susan work with you on those two books?
No, not directly. It was sparked because of working with her on Dinner Possible. I think the first one was Healthy Possibilities for your older dog, because that, as a holistic veterinarian, is what you see more than anything.
True.
And so I had people asking me all these questions, and they ended up repeating, and I thought, well, gosh, lots of people might like to know that. So, yeah, that's right, older dogs. And then the others, I think you're right, it was puppy, kitten, and then I was like, well, nobody can leave out older kitties because older kitties are important too. So that's where I got the 4 Healthy Possibilities books.
In my brain, I had it all set down the other way. I was like, well, how brilliant. I mean, you had the title for one. All you have to do is go, okay, well, we're going to continue this, but with kitties. So it was a good fit. And I can see why that worked. Now, of course, I always have to ask this question, which is very simple. Are you going to write another one? Because obviously another book means 2.
Well, and I have toyed with the idea of writing books for specific health conditions, and then it's like, well, then maybe there just needs to be a whole book to put it together. And so I'm toying with ideas. I'm actually right now finishing authoring a chapter in a textbook for traditional Chinese veterinary medicine food therapy. The director, our fearless leader of traditional Chinese veterinary medicine in this country is Dr. Shea at the Chi Institute in Reddick, Florida. And so he's editing a book and asked a whole bunch of us to write chapters. And so I'm writing one of the chapters for that book. And so when I finish that chapter, then I'm going to start thinking about what's next.
What's next? Yeah.
That's right.
Well, you can't stop in 4. You gotta, and little inserts of chapters, they don't count as enough. We gotta get more in there. So that's the author side. We've talked about the side of the pre-veterinarian and then post. Now, the one topic now, and it's one of my favorite things, and I decided to wait until now, was that ever so favorite thing, and that is the soapbox moment, as you heard with Dr. Kocher. I don't think we did it on our last episode, but I love the soapbox. What is bringing you onto the soapbox at this particular time where you're obviously, just like I am, very outspoken, and you're just yelling about XYZ to everybody who will listen.
Soapbox. How can you accuse me of that?
Well, you know, you openly said you do have that outspoken kind of personality.
I did admit that I don't always toe the line. I said that. Oh my goodness. I have to let you record me saying that. So, but you know, it's interesting because I still get to be passionate about food. And now I don't really have restrictions. I do have restrictions because we do have the law. So here I am, this great place. What am I going to do with myself once I relinquished my license? And Susan said, start this trade association and start representing these pet food companies. And so 2 years later, that's what I'm doing. It's Next Generation Pet Food Manufacturers Association, which is a whole lot to say. And if you take the first letters, it's ngpfma.org. So I represent the pet food manufacturers of all those awesome foods that you like to talk about on your show. And also the retailers and the distributors of these foods, because just like you and Dr. Koger were talking last week, all that excitement in New Jersey last week about the raw milk, everybody's not, the retailers aren't represented. And I had talked to my board of directors about opening up membership to retailers and the distributors. And so here we have our perfect opportunity because there's some things that need to be discussed. And it's actually, this is such an exciting time because there are changes that are going to come about because of these, I'm going to call them miscommunications. I'm going to say that maybe the law wasn't fully explored when it was written in New Jersey. And then compare, because I've had reason to look at the state commercial feed laws, since that's what pet food is regulated under, because commercial feed, doesn't that make you think of livestock feed?
Yes.
But yeah, it includes dog and cat and gerbil and guinea pig food and all these foods. So other states, so currently New Jersey is the only state left that completely no way, no how is there any possible way for a human to buy raw milk for human consumption. Other states have anywhere from, yeah, sure, you can buy it, it has to have a label, to, well, there's some really strict ways that you can do it, but it can be done. Make sure I have my states right. I believe it's Nevada that, I believe it's Nevada. I may be wrong. But they have on their law, you can't, raw milk for humans, no, except for a couple of special things. And in the human law and the commercial feed law, they said, and not for animals either, unless certain conditions are met. They were smart. They covered it in the entire law. New Jersey didn't.
Really?
We have a loophole. We have an opening. So, and I realize I'm telling New Jersey what to do, however. I think they already realize where their mistake was made. We have room for a lot of discussion, and discussion's perfect. This is what we need. We need to talk. Because until now, there hasn't been room to talk and discuss. And really, this is what we need. This is how change is made, is through discussions. Not through arguments, because then everybody kind of, we all get in our high horse and can't hear the other side. But through discussions, that's really where change comes about slowly. But so this is awesome. I'm very excited.
And see, I find it to be very strange because and you segue perfectly. It's like you've done this before.
You trained me.
Oh no, I don't. I will never get to take credit for training anybody because you're actually good at the segue, which I would not be able to take credit for. But the reality here is we had last Wednesday, which was how this whole discussion between you and I started. In New Jersey, every retailer were hit by the FDA and all their product was seized, which makes me have that question isn't that illegal seizure? Even though it's the government, that's an illegal seizure because that product still costs companies money. That's what I found.
Well, and let me, so actually it was the New Jersey Department of Health.
Ah, okay.
Technically, the FDA right now, technically they're all furloughed. But that is, you know.
I'll hold my joke.
Discussion.
Right.
Yeah, please. Yeah, which, you know, let's hold government hostage. But anyway, so the New Jersey Department of Health that regulates human food put a stop sale on pet feed that's regulated by the Commercial Feed Act. So, yes, it is indeed very exciting. And you're right. It made a lot of people, understandably, very upset. I mean, this is huge. This product is very important to the health of a lot of animals.
And see, that's what I found to be very interesting. And here's the other part is it's not this whole topic in raw milk, and especially in New Jersey, it's not hitting the media at all. Nobody wants to talk about this, which I find to be absolutely bizarre. It's completely hidden, swept under the rug, and yet small businesses have been affected by it. Now, the part that really catches me is, okay, you know, the FDA is on hiatus, you know, hypothetically, which we've all seen and heard multiple different things come out last week.
Yeah, they actually have been working still.
Yeah, that's
without pay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and you know, we can go back to the answers thing briefly, which was a warning letter, but they still put out their own statements and their own opinion. And then a couple days later, we found out, and I will say masks the whole thing in New Jersey, where they did put a recall on a couple different dry kibble companies. Subsequently, not the big companies, little ones, just to kind of look like we're not biased. And that's me speaking, just me opinion. But now, you know, hidden in all of this is this little place called Jersey where they've now stepped in and said no consumption to be sold in stores. We don't care if it's animal. We don't care if it's human. No sale of consumption, which I find to be bizarre because the people who are putting this sanction aren't even involved in pets. They're involved in human. I'm lost. How can this even transpire? How can we even come to this conclusion?
Yes. You've got the exact right question. And that was one of my questions that I asked of the Department of Health. So I asked several questions, and one of them was, what was the impetus? Because, I suspect that you and Susan have talked about how commercial feed is regulated. So every state has their own laws for how they're going to regulate pet food, along with all the other feed that they regulate. But the Department of Agriculture or state chemist's office, whatever you call it in the given state, accepts a fee from every pet food company that's selling food in their state. And I pointed this out to both the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Health in New Jersey. I said, you have accepted fees from these companies who manufacture raw goat milk for pets. And you've accepted these fees for several years. And now all of a sudden you're going to stop sale on this product that you have accepted money for. So there might be a conflict there. Maybe.
Now, and this is something that you would probably know a little bit more than I would, and that is with raw milk. I know with goat's milk in different parts of the country, they have to have this yellowish tint to kind of change it from the traditional pasteurized white colored milk. So the goat milk has to be a yellowish color per state.
It depends on the state.
Right.
And that's a great question. So there are a couple of states. So yes, most states say you just need to do some kind of a color additive. And in the massive official publication for APCO, there are about 60 pages of potential color additives that can be used, and some are natural, which are things like beta-carotene or turmeric, beet juice, that sort of thing. Well, one of the states says that, and their state law says there are exactly 4 colors that can be used. One of them is charcoal. One is food dye blue, food dye green, and maybe food dye red.
I was afraid of that color.
Right. And so nobody wants those colors in their milk. And so that state, though, because it is formally written into their commercial feed law, well, they at least got it covered in their commercial feed law. So now we know how we need to approach it in that one state. But most of the states, if they want a color additive, do accept the beta-carotene slight yellowish. Yeah.
Which makes sense.
It's amazing what you have to know.
Right. Right.
And beta-carotene, that's fine. I feel comfortable with that in the goat milk for dogs and cats.
Yeah, I have no problem with it either, because, again, you're staying in the holistic side. We're not adding anything that's going to diminish the quality. But I find that all to be very bizarre in itself. Now, here's something when I was doing my research on this, states that allow the sale of raw milk only on the farm, or these were supposedly in stores, in retail stores. And it was Arizona, California, Connecticut, Idaho, Maine, New Mexico, Nevada, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, and Washington. So those are the only states that were allowed. And you think to yourself, that's not a lot. And again, what's the problem with selling raw milk? It's not going to have any kind of negative effect.
Die.
Yes, that's true.
There's bacteria in there. And people who are immune suppressed and animals who are immune suppressed, yeah, okay, they're at risk. Don't feed it to them. Use common sense. Yeah. It was, pasteurization, it started for our safety, but it happened because things weren't clean.
Right.
And so anybody who's manufacturing a raw dairy product has very high standards, because if their product isn't clean, people are getting sick and somebody's having a recall. And it's justifiable. If people are sick, it's justifiable. So, yes, it was for our safety. And now we all know so much more, and science is so much better. There are methods to make it safe.
There are, and that's what I find to be bizarre with this, because it's like, okay, well, I get some of this, but if this and every one of those packages, I'm going to go out there. I haven't seen any of them, but I'm going to take a wild guess that they all said raw milk for probably animals, whether it's a dog, cat, or animal. So it always had something clearly written on the packaging. It wasn't some mason jar with no sticker on it. It was clearly labeled, so we knew.
Yeah, that's because the Department of Agriculture insists that it's there. The milk that was poured down the drain in New Jersey very clearly says for animal consumption only, not for human consumption. Because the New Jersey Department of Agriculture insisted that be written there.
And that makes sense, because why would you not? I mean, honestly, as a consumer, I'm just going to speak as the consumer side of this. If I'm going into the store and I'm buying milk, I'm not going to buy goat's milk for my regular, everyday use. I don't want goat's milk for my cereal, but that's just me. I'm not gonna.
Like a goat.
I'm not gonna buy buttermilk You know, it's things like this, right? Have you ever tasted buttermilk? That is awful.
My grandmother drank a glass of buttermilk every day of her 96 years of life.
My
That
grandfather
was her
did.
reason for longevity. I'm skipping it.
I don't understand. My grandfather did the same thing, and I tried it once, and it was like they put the glass of milk over a heater and just let it mold and ew. Yeah. The cottage cheese texture. Yeah, it's awful.
It's wrong.
But you know it's buttermilk or it's half and half or whatever the thing it clearly states. So I didn't understand how that plays into it. Something else that I found, and as you can probably tell, it's always about statistics, that I think is really funny because, of course, we all know the FDA is on their sabbatical or hiatus, yes. Even though we have found out they're really not. So wink, wink for that. But I thought this was funny. Out of a 10-year study, this statistic is just, it's almost a part of staggering and so scary and sad at the same time. But the deaths in 10 years, in a 10-year study, deaths due to FDA-approved prescription drugs was over 1 million. 1,060,000. And that's in a 10-year, right? And these are all drugs. Now, I can, of course, top that with something even worse. Deaths due to the USDA-approved food. So the FDA is saying how, raw feeding is terrible for your dogs, and you should stay away from it because you're going to contaminate your dog with salmonella, which is a load of crap, as we debunked last week. Again, very outspoken, sarcastic. I know.
That's you. It's okay.
That's me. I'll own it. So, out of produce, in a 10 years, produce deaths were 3,330 people. Just produce alone. That's kind of crazy to think. Poultry was the result of 2,780 people. That's just poultry. Pork, which I was surprised, because pork, you can make a lot of claims on pork, but only 820. That's not terrible, but it's still a bad number. Fish was 710. I think we can kind of guesstimate how that worked out. And beef at the lowest at 550. I thought, and this is
10 years.
In 10 years. That's still a really scary and staggering number. But I'm going to actually add one little thing more, and that is, how many deaths do you think occurred in 10 years that were reported due to raw milk?
Oh, to humans, I assume, of course.
I would assume, yes.
I'm guessing 0.
It's a very good guess, and you are correct. 0 deaths in 10 years. Yeah, I know, right? I should add that sound effect to it. And now we're so concerned, and we're throwing our hands in the air going, oh my gosh, raw milk, get it off the shelves. It's almost kind of like we're going to have a speakeasy when it comes to raw milk now. New Jersey being a great place. I, of course, had to throw that in there. But, 0 reported deaths for raw milk. But we're now thrusting in here as some FBI agents going, we're shutting this raw milk factory down. It's ridiculous. I'm at a loss for words, and I can't fathom this. So
me too. I'm sitting here going, whoa, wow,
right?
Because your statistics are great, and you're right. Nobody wants to be a death because of food, or to have that on their hands, or to know anybody that it happened to. Sadly, most of the people who probably did die because of any of these foods, in most cases, I imagine something was wrong with their immune system. But that is mind-blowing about the raw milk.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, we can always throw in salmonella could have been the issue, but And of course, I'm beating a dead horse, no pun intended. But it could have very well, for a lot of these different things, been a salmonella issue. But they were all tested by the USDA, so it should all be good, correct? No, obviously not.
Oh, you know better than that. Yeah,
Well,
and it is not just salmonella. It's interesting because salmonella is our big concern, and it's partly because salmonella is actually a really smart bacteria that knows how to mutate and adapt to new environments. But there's, E. coli. Oh, my goodness. I mean, I'm not trying to be gross, but look at any pile of poop, and it's absolutely loaded with E. coli because it's a normal, healthy bacteria, except for the every now and then pathogenic E. coli 0157H7, which means that it's super toxic. But even a whole bunch of us have that. Oh my goodness, I hate to say it to you, Chris, but you might have it in your intestines right now.
Yeah.
And then Campylobacter and cheese and Listeria is an opportunist, and there are other bacteria that can show up. But if you have good, healthy other bacteria and good gut, then we're safe.
Right.
As long as you're healthy.
But
there are people who are high risk, and they know they're high risk, and they're careful.
And yet, we're still throwing out, and again, we all know the FDA's favorite word is salmonella. If you remember the old 80s show with Pee Wee Herman, he would have the word of the day. It would come out as salmonella, and that would be the best call. Every time you hear the word salmonella, you yell, "Yay!"
That's funny.
Again, got to reference.
You have dated yourself.
Oh, I'm fine with it. I own that one proudly. I do.
That's cool.
But it's one of those, it just doesn't make any sense. I get it. Should people really be drinking raw milk? If they have a high immune system and they're healthy, I don't think it's a big deal. But here's the kicker. Back to, again, the packaging. It's still said for animals, folks.
It does that.
I know. So I'm trying to, in my mind, I'm trying to find ways of understanding all of this. And I haven't been able to figure out what is the real risk here. Obviously, we covered the fact that it's not a health risk. We have 0 reports in 10 years of death because of it. The packaging clearly says for animals, and I've used goat milk, and I'll tell you, it is a godsend when it comes to any kind of dog or cat puppies that are early age and they don't have a mother. It works phenomenal.
Yep, I agree. Well, and your question is great. And so interesting, when I was talking to the Department of Ag representative at New Jersey about how this happened, and he supposed that somebody had bought the raw goat milk for pets and drunk it for themselves as humans, and that they got sick and filed a complaint. Who would do that?
Okay.
They proposed that, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm buying that, but maybe.
Okay, I'm still going to ask the question. Now, do they have a picture of a dog or cat on the label? Like a silhouette of it? Okay, so let's take away the fact that the person is unable to read. They can still see a silhouette of a dog or cat.
Where's the common sense? I have no idea.
Sorry, I just had to beat that one more time. Just did.
I know that you could beat it.
That one.
The horse is dead.
Oh gosh, I mean, honestly, well, don't tell Big Pet Food. They may try to take the horse and use it as meat. Hopefully, it doesn't have any pentobarbital in it. Wow. Yes, I went there, folks. And you expect it. So, what do you think is going to happen with all of this going on?
What, the New Jersey part of it?
Yeah. What do you think's what's going to transpire? How is this going to change or rectify?
Well, I'm waiting for feedback from both the Department of Health and the Department of Agriculture. I suspect they're going to come back and tell me that they think that it's a righteous stop sale, and that's fine. So then the next step is we'll be having more conversations. The thing that's interesting about every time that we as the public, anybody living in the United States, we live here, we're citizen, that's the word. When we deal with the government, there are procedures in place how to change things. So this is where we said conversation earlier. So conversation. So administratively, we'll start on an administrative basis. So the next thing, I've already shown them the law, and Susan Sixton, from the consumer perspective, has already demonstrated the law to both the Department of Ag and the Department of Health at New Jersey. We've shown it to them. And then when they come back with their answer, then we know where they're coming from so that we can continue conversations. We're going to exhaust every administrative route first, and hopefully that will get a resolution, some kind of an agreement, some kind of, you need to make make the label twice as big, put 2 signs up that this is for animals, make somebody sign an affidavit. I don't know. But if we need to, we can go to changing law. And that's always a possibility. And so that's part of why I am executive director of this trade association. This is how we get things done.
So that's
how all the big trade associations do it.
What you're saying is you can adult much better than somebody like me. Because I would be making jokes.
I know how to put those shoes on.
I can put the shoes on. I can't tie them. That's my problem.
It's okay. You don't have to walk. You just have to have them on when you're on the phone. It's okay.
But at least they talk to you. I mean, I got to say this. They at least talk to you. They will not talk to me, and I've tried. They've offered to give a statement by, letter or by email. I want to hear it from their mouth, but at least you see, you're already making strides that I can't make. So I applaud you. An author.
Thank you.
so here's where we are. You're an author. You're still a doctor, and you can't take that away from you. You are retired Air Force. You can't take that away from you. You are an advocate. Can't take that away from you. So at the end, let's kind of go back 2 years and laugh at the people who thought that they were being smart and taking you down. And instead, you've kind of risen above anything you probably would have ever done.
I think you're absolutely right. I would never have dreamed of this. And talk about being able to make an impact for more animals than when I was treating them on a one-on-one basis. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So now you have the opportunity to kind of, laugh at the people who decided to just be absolute liars. And I mean, honestly, that's where my big boy pants come in. That's where I would be. I'd be laughing at them, but that's just me.
It works.
It does. So we've kind of, in a sense, I think we've covered the New Jersey situation as best as possible. Right now, it's just a matter of what's next. What's the resolution or something from that. What have we not covered that we should have covered?
Well, in December, shortly before the government got their mandatory Christmas vacation that they're still taking, I did, representing our manufacturers. Wow, my brain shut off for a second there. I went to the FDA representing the raw pet food members in our trade association. And that's something that I should probably make sure it's clear, is that the members of Next Gen pet food manufacturers are not just the manufacturers of raw pet food products, because there are a lot of other very small manufacturers, and think of all the treat companies that are using real ingredients, the ones that meet the definition of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. So any of those companies are my members or are potentially my members. But so we do have a subset that makes raw pet food. And so I did open conversation with the FDA early in December for where their thinking originated on their zero tolerance policy. And so what I'm wanting to do is, through the conversation, find a starting point so that they can be successful and we can be successful, but that the industry is protected. And so you probably, do you eat Caesar salad? You eat Caesar salad, Chris?
I do. With that whole romaine lettuce issue, I kind of stopped eating any kind of salad out of absolute fear. But
oh, no, you're using that as your excuse not to eat green.
No. I love salad. I mean, it is, my daughter and I, we love salad. And it, obviously I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a little bit more panicky because, and I'm sure a lot of parents felt this way. Well, I better, not buy that.
Well, so that's perfect, what you've just said. So there's a whole bunch of things that you just said there. So we had the 2 romaine lettuce recalls in 2018. Mm-hmm. Romaine lettuce is one of the foods that's regulated by the FDA. Mm-hmm. So this is cool. We can basically compare apples to apples now of how the FDA is regulating and helping the romaine industry and how they're regulating the raw pet food industry. I don't know if you read any of the press releases that came from the FDA about romaine lettuce, but what they said at the end, Dr. Gottlieb said at the end of both of the press releases was, it is part of the FDA's job to help the industry. And we're talking about romaine lettuce right now.
Right.
So romaine lettuce. Do you have any idea how big the industry is in the United States?
Oh boy, I mean, I would imagine it's
romaine.
I would imagine it's really, really big because it's the only kind of lettuce that we bought. So I'm going to guess it's probably the number 1 lettuce sold in America type.
It's 30% of the lettuce sold.
Wow.
The lettuce overall is $1.5 million in, do I have my numbers right? 1.5 billion retail sales, so that romaine lettuce sells 500 million in a year. It's really not that big. I mean, let's put it in perspective. All pet food sales in the United States in a year last year was $30 billion. So romaine lettuce at 500 million is actually smallish.
I would have thought it would have been more.
Well, we all love Caesar salad, and that's pretty consistent when you go to a restaurant. So,
true.
How big do you think the raw pet food industry is?
Oh, in percentage?
So if we're doing 500 million for a romaine, what's your guess for raw pet food? So percentage of the industry is like tiny.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go in dollars. I'll say in dollars, and it's based off of the fact that a lot of people I don't think are on board. So I'm going to say, I want to say 150 million a year.
You're really close. It's about 200.
Okay.
Yeah. So think of that. So the raw pet food industry is about half the size of the romaine lettuce industry. Mm-hmm. The FDA is in the business of helping agricultural commodities. They said this in their press releases regarding the romaine lettuce industry. They've taken a bunch of steps to help the industry so that they can clean things up, so they can communicate to the consumer. And if you take the plunge and go back out and buy some romaine lettuce. It now has a sticker on it telling you where it's from, and just wash the heck out of it. It's fine. Just wash it a little bit extra. It's fine. I'm still here. My challenge is that the raw pet food industry should be treated the same.
Right.
I would like to see that on press releases, that same statement that the FDA is here to help that industry.
Well, it's funny because now I want a salad. So that's a problem. I can pretty much guarantee I'm having salad later. But because that just sounds really good. And again, I'm digressing, so let's go back on track. I would like to see less witch hunt and less bias against raw feeding or any kind of companies, because honestly, the FDA is not showing any kind of gray area or bias or being able to say, okay, I'm okay with kibble. I'm okay with the industry having raw. Instead, it's just saying, no, don't feed raw, period. And I mean, it's right there in all of their press releases. And that's what shocks me, is that they're actually weighing their opinion, which they're not even supposed to have an opinion. Shocking.
Heavy sigh. Have you read the compliance? You're familiar with the FDA and the compliance policy guide that they write. Do you understand that, how they basically regulate a lot of things that they do?
I have read different things, different parts on it. I'm not proficient, but it's...
Yeah, don't. You'll hurt yourself. But what's really interesting, if you read the beginning of any of these compliance policy guides, they say it's guidance for staff, and in a box at the very top, it says, this guidance represents the Food and Drug Administration's current thinking on this topic. It does not create or confer any rights for or on any person and does not operate to bind the FDA or the public. You can use an alternative approach if the approach satisfies the requirements of the applicable statutes and regulations. They are not law. They are compliance policy guides. They are suggestions. And this is what we're fighting.
Oh, it's bizarre, and yet I don't even have a word for it that would really put into perspective as just a consumer, not as somebody who's doing this show. But I don't even have any kind of phrase for it. It's beyond bizarre. Well,
and this is where I want the communication. This is why I started it, is that we have to figure out, where did this start, so that we can all come out winning, so that nobody's destroyed, so that nobody is looked like a fool. Because I don't want the FDA to look like fools. They're really trying to protect our best interests. So how can we work together to get to that point? And so that's where I started the conversation in December. Unfortunately, they were supposed to get back to me today at the ASCO meeting, and yeah, they're not here because they're supposedly not working. I actually feel horrible for these people. They're working. They're just not getting paid. So,
Well, I would, and I'm going to venture out and say this, if it was in maybe Miami or Los Angeles or a fun city, I'm pretty sure they would have gone. But, I mean, is there a lot to do in Savannah, Georgia? Probably not as much as they could have.
Savannah's gorgeous. You've never been here. I've not been here before. It's a beautiful city. There's amazing architecture and history, and there's this great walking tour that I've heard about because I'm inside.
But there's no gorgeous beaches, and it's chilly. I mean, there's two things. They want to go to a beach and sip any kind of drinks out of with an umbrella, and they would have shown up for those.
Umbrellas.
Well, you guys have umbrellas because it's cold right now, just like it's cold here. So I get this. So I guarantee if it was back in Anaheim, California, or if it was
there you go.
then yes, they're going to be there. But sadly, but that's again, folks, that's my opinion, and I'm sticking to that.
There you go.
Well, I mean, I honestly think that there's so many different things, and when it comes to the USDA, the FDA, all of the regulations. I mean, I joke, but I also find that it's just the stats don't lie. And as a scientist, everything goes on statistic. It doesn't go on just idea. You base everything on it, and obviously, raw milk isn't going to kill you.
Apparently, nobody.
Yeah. Yes, and the other side to that, 10 years, nobody died. There's got to be a positive. I'm pretty sure somebody has died off of regular pasteurized milk. I would have to do the research, so don't quote me, but I'm sure I could find it.
Yeah, okay.
We'll get back to that another time. So we're hopeful that everything changes. I do. Now, one last thing when it comes to the New Jersey one. So even if you went to a farm, you couldn't buy raw milk even from a farmer at a farm. It would, in a sense, be kind of bootlegging it. Would that be a good observation?
Correct.
Man, that's weird.
Yeah. In New Jersey, there are some states that's how it could be done. It used to be. So Indiana, I used to live in Indiana after the whole going to vet school thing until about 2 years ago. So Indiana, you could go to a farm and you could trade for raw milk. And now they've actually passed laws making it very specific conditions in which raw milk can be sold. And I'm pretty sure that it's not for human consumption. So if you're inhuman, you can buy it in Indiana.
I actually looked this up as we're going. States that allow sales of raw milk only on the farm on which it was produced, the states allow it. And again, these are such small amounts of states. But Arkansas, Illinois, Kansas, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Nebraska, and this one's a kicker, New York, Oklahoma, Texas, and Wisconsin. Now,
oh, wow.
I find that to be very strange because technically, in my mind, they're bootleggers. So I find that to be very comical.
They're legal bootleggers.
I just see a wheelbarrow, a guy in a zoot suit pushing it down the way, and going down a back alley. And hey, you got some raw milk? Yes, I do. I don't.
Dude, I got some milk. Trunk open.
the black market.
Hurry. That's right.
It's the irony of it. I hope that people just put that image in their brain. And just because that's what's in my brain at this moment. Like, really, we're worried about milk? What's next? This is out of control. Wow.
Unfortunately, there are people that don't understand that real food is alive, and they don't want any risk, and so they want all food to be sterile. And I guess that idea comes out of fear.
Yeah.
And I can see where it comes from, but that's where education is so important. And so your statistics that you shared with the illnesses due to meat, you're right. It's fascinating how low the deaths from eating pork are. But do you know why it's that low?
We cook it.
And why do you cook it? Because the USDA trained us since the 50s of the importance of cooking pork to the internal temperature of 165. Training.
Well, that's the whole point. Is it's all about education.
Yeah.
I mean, shocking.
Absolutely.
Come on. I mean, that's what always shocks me with life right now. It was different even 10 years ago when smartphones first really made their way out on the market. It wasn't as in your face as it is today. Everything you possibly can want to know is right here on your phone. You literally carry more. You have more than a library. You have everything right here, and you can read it and cross-reference it within seconds. Where it used to be, I got to get like 5 books and go through reference on everyone just to get to this one little fact, this little nugget of fact. It's not hard, but we're still living in a fear-based world, and I don't understand that because look at your phones. The thing that you're listening to the podcast on, you can find out everything. You can call me on my BS anytime you want because it's right there.
Right there. Mm-hmm.
It's shocking, but it's easy for anybody to say, or I should say FDA, to say salmonella, and everybody cringes because, oh no, we're all gonna die. No, and that's why statistics are important, folks. Yeah. So with that, anything else that we should kick around? Because again, you're always welcome to come back, and as you can tell, it does happen a lot.
I would love to.
As you know, Kojo is leading the way at 8 visits, so you know.
I've got a ways to get caught up.
Yep, and I'll tell you, there are people who want to catch her number and beat her number, which is very funny because I just find this to be a lot of fun to be able to talk about this stuff, and I don't understand why we're not having more of these conversations, why this isn't out there, why we're not talking about this, but we really care about what TMZ is putting out there. I don't get it. So
I don't either.
All right. Well, I guess we'll just kind of unfortunately end on this one. But folks, I guarantee Dr. Cathy will be back. Is there anything you want to say before we sign off?
Oh, this has been my pleasure. Thank you so much. I really love the opportunity. Let's talk more food.
Anytime. Well, I'm Chris Green. Have a fantastic week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Okay, gotta go in my bedtime.